her speak before. If you guys were at the Women's March 2 years ago, this next speaker gave a powerful and empowered speech. And her name is Maricela Cola Martinez. Yes, round of applause for her. Can we get some people to help carry that banner back there? Sorry.
I'm gonna go ahead and take my mask off as well. Hi everyone. I'm Dr. Maricela Martinez Cola. I say doctor because it took me a long time to get that title, right? I'm really honored that Mario asked me to come and speak to you all. I'm ready to go, here we go. I remember the first time I ever heard the N-word. I had to have been about 5 years old. My tia, my Aunt Sandra, was fairly dark-skinned, and my uncle would call her that in some strange form of affection. Hey, N-word, come here. Hey, N-word, go clean the dishes. Hey, N-word, where are you going? I remember, even at that age, it didn't feel loving or kind. I remember being uncomfortable. Now, he was the only one I ever heard use that phrase openly. But in my bilingual household, the way my family talked about Black people was even more grating. One of the first things my mother learned when she immigrated into this country and eventually moved to Michigan was to not trust Black people. Again, even as a kid, I would hear adults talk, and it didn't make sense to me. They were talking about our neighbors, Lyles, who had 3 girls just like us. Sheila, Stacy, and Cherie were not these terrible people they were talking about. My best friend, JD, was not this dangerous Black man they would talk about. My 2nd grade teacher, Mrs. Burris, the only teacher of color I ever had from K through 12. She was firm but fair. She wasn't this terrible person they were talking about. I remember she was a member of Delta Sigma Theta, which is a historically Black sorority, and she loved the color red and white. And she had a white elephant on her desk, and I remember telling my mom, you love white elephants too, just like Mrs. Burris. I remember asking my mother why she held such venom against Black people, especially when a Black man and woman helped her get her government job. She shared about an incident with my tia Sandra, and as she was telling the story, she had such rage in her eyes. At the time, the only thing my junior high self could say was, so are you going to make every Black person pay for one person? Mr. Rudolph, Miss Edna, Mr. and Mrs. Lyle, Charles, John, Dr. Robinson, all of them? I wish I could say that that changed her, but unfortunately that was a task that was going to take much longer. I share this because I really want and need to bring to light the anti-Blackness that ran through my family. Really, the anti-Blackness that runs through many Latinx families. Where they saw division, I saw connections. They hated rap music, but I heard similar sounds in salsa or the storytelling of corridos. Looking back, I am so grateful for the people I had in my life. They were living, breathing, and beautiful contradictions of everything. My family, films, television, and the news wanted me to believe about Black children, men, women, and non-binary individuals. My life has been blessed with learning from Black scholars, being mentored by amazing Black men and women, supported by Black organizations, and some of the most treasured loves and friendships in my life. So when Black Lives Matter came about, I didn't think, doesn't my Chicana life matter too? I say, of course Black Lives Matter, because I'd seen too many instances when their lives didn't matter. For example, while people of color make up 30% of the population, they account for 60% of those imprisoned, specifically 1 in every 15 African-American men incarcerated, compared to every 1 in 106 white men. The Department of Justice found that African Americans are 3 times more likely to be searched during a traffic stop than white motorists. African Americans are twice as likely to be arrested, almost 4 times as likely to experience a use of force during encounters with police. The number of women incarcerated has increased by over 800% over the last 3 decades. Black women are 3 times more likely than white women to be incarcerated. And still, an amazing Black woman was able to become a prosecutor in the law, a senator to create and make law, and eventually became the Vice President of these United States, Kamala Harris. We had Eric Holder and Loretta Lynch that were the first Black Attorney Generals of the United States. In other ways, Black students represent more than 70% of those involved in school-related arrests or referrals to law enforcement. Black youth make up 2/5 of the youths confined today. According to the Department of Education, 96,000 students were arrested in 2009, 2010, and 242,000 were referred to law enforcement by schools. Of those students, Black and Latinx students made up 70% of those arrested and referred. And still, we have Diamond Shakur, who began playing chess at the age of 7, and by 8 was the youngest Black female to go undefeated in a national chess competition. We have Mosiah Mo Bridges, who turned down a $50,000 offer on Shark Tank for his handmade bow ties, and 3 years later signed a 7-figure deal to supply bow ties to the NBA. And we have Marley Diaz, who at 11 began her hashtag 1000 Black Girl Books campaign, aimed at trying to find 1,000 Black books with girls as the protagonist. We have Ashton Mota, a young trans teen who created the Yes on 3 campaign to uphold a state law that provided protections for transgender people in Massachusetts. At his private school, he demanded and he fought for the right to use his name and play on the boys' basketball team. And most recently, we have Amanda Gorman, who at 21 was the youngest poet to ever deliver an inaugural poem. According to the census in 2017, the average Black median household income was $40,165 compared to $65,845 for white households. 22.9% of African Americans live in poverty compared to 9.6% of white people. The unemployment rate of African Americans has been almost twice that of whites ever since 1954. In 1954, the unemployment rate was 5% for whites and 9.9% for African Americans. In 2013, nearly 60 years later, the Black unemployment rate was 13.4% and the white unemployment rate was 6.7%. And yet, and still, we have an amazing billionaire who just a few years ago when I was there at Morehouse was able to pay the full tuition of every Morehouse grad that particular year, making their lives so much better.
We are home!
All right. Thank you for sticking with me, y'all. In 2017, 55% of African Americans used private health insurance compared to 75% of whites. 49% of African Americans relied on Medicaid or public health compared to 33.7% of whites. 9.9% African Americans were uninsured compared to 5.9% of whites. African Americans suffer from high blood pressure, diabetes, and suffer strokes at rates significantly higher than that of white people. The Black pregnancy mortality rate for Black women is 40.8 deaths per 100,000 births compared to 12.7 for whites. For Black women with a college degree, it is 5.2 times more likely that they will die in birth than their white counterparts. And yet, the woman who led the effort to find the first COVID vaccine, Kizmika Corbett, is a Black woman. Dr. Charles Bolden, an accomplished kidney transplant surgeon, one of 17 African Americans in this country to hold that title. Dr. Harold P. Freeman, founder and president of the Ralph Lauren Center for Cancer Care and Prevention in New York City. And Dr. Alexa Canaday, a young Black woman who thought about dropping out of college and eventually graduated from the University of Michigan to become the first African American neurosurgeon specialist. These statistics represent the nameless, faceless Black children, women and men, and non-binary individuals who suffered under the weight of systemic oppression. While I followed these sad statistics with powerful Black figures, I'm not tokenizing them. I want you to understand how problematic it is that I can even name them. In preparing for this talk, I couldn't remember the name of the Black trans activist that I talked about. I put in Google, young Black trans activist, but before I could even get to his story, I scrolled through pages and pages and news reports of murders and deaths of Black transgender men, women, and non-binary people.
No shit!
I often tell my students that when a flower doesn't grow, you don't blame the flower. You have to look around the flower. What kind of soil is it in? How much water does it receive? How much love and care and attention does it get? Sure, we have flowers that overcome all odds and burst forth through concrete. We have flowers that can overcome, despite having no water and too much sun, can thrive in a desert. And yes, sometimes even the most beautiful flowers grow in the darkest and coldest places. But is that the world we want? A world of concrete, desert, and darkness? But that is what systemic racism has done. We have given our Black siblings prisons of concrete that separate them from their families, food deserts that starve their bodies and brains, and darkness of poverty and poor health outcomes. We give them all this and have the nerve to ask, why can't you grow? Why aren't you growing? I'm not saying that you need Black people in your life in order for that to matter. I am saying, however, that it matters if you've never had, known, or loved someone in your life who was not exactly like you. Read a book. Watch a documentary. Read an interview to invite the beauty of Blackness in your life. Every time you confront your own anti-Blackness and the stuff that you learned and replace it with love and knowledge and power, you become a better person. Even then, we keep getting better and more love, and that's when Black lives will matter to you even more. It's no excuse that you live in a predominantly white town, that you go to a predominantly white church, that most of the friends that sit around your table are white. That's no excuse. And also, don't go to your friends of color and ask them to educate you. All right, I'm a professor, but man, I got a life too. I have a wonderful husband and son back there. You know, I can't spend my life teaching everyone every single time. All right? Go and you know, as the young people say, read a book. It's amazing that once you invite all of that into your life, how much more beautiful and amazing this world becomes. I came from Atlanta, Georgia, and I miss Atlanta so much in so many ways. But I love that I get to share all the things I loved about Atlanta here and carry it in my heart. Thank you all so much. I appreciate that.